So you've been reading about Thales and his students, Anaximander and Anaximenes, collectively known as the Milesians or the Milesian philosophers. I might ask some questions on the exam about the Milesians collectively, but I promise I won't ask any specific questions about Anaximander or Anaximenes. I won't, for example, be asking you what Anaximander thought was the primordial substance. I won't be asking you about the indeterminate boundless. I won't be making you know about how Anaximenes thought that the primordial substance was air, or why he speculated that. But you should know that the Milesian philosophers were concerned with finding what this primordial substance might be, that they were concerned with the same metaphysical question that Thales was concerned with. These two interrelated questions, really. What was the world made of, and where did the world come from? Well, we want to shift gears a little bit as we continue to talk about the pre Socratic philosophers, that is, the important philosophers before Socrates in the Western world. So we're starting with Thales about 6 centuries BCE. Well, about 5 centuries BCE, about 500 years before the Common Era, across the Aegean. There was this fellow named Pythagoras, and you probably have heard of Pythagoras, maybe not as a philosopher, maybe in mathematics, the Pythagorean theorem, for instance. Well, Pythagoras was very interested in numbers, uh, not because he wanted to solve any specific problem. He wasn't an engineer, he wasn't trying to solve any applied problem. Now, of course, without what Pythagoras gave us, we couldn't build a suspension bridge. But that's, of course, not what Pythagoras was after. Pythagoras wanted to know about numbers because he wanted to know about numbers. He was chasing knowledge in a very abstract way. Really, in the same way that Thales believed that there was a primordial substance, I think it's fair to say that Pythagoras was chasing a kind of primordial form. He thought that the way to understand the world wasn't by understanding substance or material. The way to understand the world was to understand numbers. He thought everything was reducible to numbers and to mathematics. Everything is quantifiable. Take any shape, and we can quantify it. Any 2 points is a line. Take any 3 points and make a triangle, and 4 points in a rectangle. I'm not sure if that's the case. Anyway, you understand where I'm going with this. Pythagoras is the one who began to express the notes in music um, numerically, and the chords that we have. This comes from Pythagoras and from his students, the Pythagoreans. So if you grew up in playing in the band, and you played a C major chord, it's been a long time for me. What is that? Maybe a C, E, and G, I think. And so each is playing that part, right? Well, anyway, if you're playing that chord, each is playing the one, the three, and the five. Well, it's Pythagoras who assigned these numbers and started thinking about the notes and the chords of music, and in terms of numbers. Um, he sort of founded a a mystic religion around numbers. But anyway, he thought that the key to understanding the universe was understanding mathematics. Pythagoras also thought that the human soul could be divided into three parts. This is very interesting. I'm not sure that it would be, something I would go and, make you know, except for the fact that this would become really important later when we get to Plato. Plato's division is not going to be exactly the same, but Plato will also believe in a tripartite soul, a three-part soul. Anyway, Pythagoras says that the soul is made up of three parts. And he says that the highest part, he calls it the rational part, then there's the middle part, and then the lowest part. He compares each part to the type of people that attend the Olympic Games. Remember, even though this is 500 years before Jesus, the Olympic Games are in full swing, right? So this is one of the huge things in all parts of the Greek world. The highest part of the soul, he thinks, is parallels the spectators. The spectators, and only the spectators, um, parallel the rational part of the soul because they get to see everything that's going on. They get to observe and reason out about everything that they see. The middle part of the soul, that parallels the athletes, the part of our soul that strives after glory and honor, competitiveness, the spirited part. The lowest part is exemplified by the merchants, those who go to buy and to sell and to make a profit. Um, that's what Plato would call the appetitive part of our soul, or the appetites. I also want to talk about a few other pre Socratic philosophers briefly here. Let me talk briefly about this philosopher named Heraclitus. Now, until very recently, we knew little about Heraclitus. We knew that he was important because he was mentioned as being an important philosopher uh, by others, but we had very little original text from him. Uh, but we're finding more and more all the time. One of the sort of sad things that has happened because of the downfall of the Greek economy is that they have had to open up more and more of their land for excavation, archaeological excavation, and in so doing, they have uncovered so much, uh, old artifacts. Among them, all kinds of scrolls and ancient documents, and so we now are in possession of long documents from Heraclitus and other pre-Socratic philosophers. Anyway, Heraclitus was a very important philosopher from the town of Ephesus. You might know Ephesus from the Bible. You mentioned the Ephesians, right? Well, Heraclitus also weighed in about a primordial substance. He says that the primordial substance is fire. How fire could be the primordial substance, how all things can be made of fire, I don't know. Uh, Perhaps he means this as a metaphor. It's all I can imagine. But Heraclitus said something else that I think is very, very interesting. He says, all things are in a constant state of flux. There's a very famous quotation associated with Heraclitus. He says, you cannot step twice into the same river. Think about this. What do you think he means by this? You cannot step twice into the same river. Well, if you step into the same river and you step out, you step in again, not only is the river different, but so are you. The river is constantly changing, and so are we. Everything is constantly changing. So I have a question for you to think about. You know that you have another discussion board assignment coming up soon. I haven't revealed what the topic is going to be, but I want you to start thinking about uh, some of these uh, some of these interesting questions. And here's one that I'd like for you to begin thinking about. Remember the ship of Theseus puzzle? What do you think Heraclitus would think about the ship of Theseus? If you don't remember, please go back to that video and watch that short video again. Finally, I want to talk about Parmenides and Zeno. These are the last two pre-Socratic philosophers that we'll be talking about. Parmenides was from southern Italy, from the town of Ilia. Zeno also was from that area, and Zeno was Parmenides' student. And we're going to talk about Parmenides and Zeno together, sort of as one unit, because they sort of had the same view. And Zeno put forth these paradoxes that that help to establish Parmenides' view. Here's what Parmenides said. Parmenides said, "It certainly looks as though the world is ever changing, but that can't be so." Said, "How could we possibly account for change? For anything to change, things would have to come into or go out of being, and that can't be the case." It says, really, our senses cannot be trusted. What we can trust is reason. And he gives us an example. He says, think about an oar in the water. The oar appears to be bent there at the surface of the water. But we know that it isn't, and we trust reason. Anytime reason conflicts with our senses, we should trust reason. And since our senses have been known to deceive us, at least some of the time, we should be skeptical of our senses. Parmenides says that change and motion are illusions. There is only one thing, and it is static and permanent. Nothing changes, nothing comes into being, nothing goes out of being. Everything is one and eternal. Well, Zeno was a student of Parmenides and tried to demonstrate this. And you'll read there about Zeno's four paradoxes. Don't get too confounded, about these paradoxes. I would like to maybe ask you something on an exam about Zeno's paradoxes, but I won't make you go through all four of them. Here's a basic idea. So Zeno wants to say that change and motion are impossible. And he says, okay, let's say that here is point A and here's point B. Now, would you all agree that to go from point A to point B, you'd have to first pass through the midpoint, point C? All agree to that? Okay. Now, to go from A to C, you have to go between the midpoint between A and C, right? Point D. Now, to go between point A and point D, you have to go through the midpoint between A and D, right? We call that point E. And before you can go to point A to point E, you got to go through the midpoint between A and E, right? Call that point F. How many times can you do this? An infinite number of times. Anyway, in order to go from point A to point B, actually, in order to go from anywhere to anywhere, you would have to go through an infinite number of points. in a finite amount of time, which is impossible, according to Zeno. That is his paradox of change and motion. That, in essence, is his proof of why change and motion are an illusion. I don't actually buy that, by the way, but let me leave you with this question. Given this view, what do you think Parmenides and Zeno would think? What would they say about the Ship of Theseus puzzle? All right, I hope I've given you lots to think about. See you in the next video. Take care, everybody.